This is Harsh Rules, I'm Ben Harsh, and today we're going to learn to play Commands and Colors Medieval. Commands and Colors Medieval was released in 2019 by GMT Games and designed by Richard Borg. This game supports 2 players and takes about an hour per scenario to play. Before we begin this episode, I'd like to recognize the Harsh Rules Patreon supporters that help make content like this possible. If you'd like to support the channel, head over to patreon.com/harshrules to learn more. And once again, thank you for your support. Welcome back to the Harsh Rules breakdown for Commands and Colors Medieval. In this episode, we're going to take a detailed look at terrain. For reference, terrain information can be found on page 20 through 22 of the rulebook. This game does not come with a terrain reference sheet, but fans have made their own over on Board Game Geek. So if you'd like one while you're playing, head over there and download a copy. Now, with that bit of housekeeping out of the way, we've got a lot of information to cover, so let's get started. Commands and Colors Medieval's first mission does not have terrain tiles, which allows new players to become acclimated with the core rules. Subsequent missions, however, use a variety of terrain to represent historical landmarks and add an additional layer of strategy to the game. This includes new rules for moving into specific terrain types, line of sight restrictions, and combat modifiers. Next, we're going to look at each of these terrain types in greater detail. Let's begin learning about terrain with broken ground. For movement, there are no restrictions for foot units. Any mounted unit or unattached leader must stop when it enters a broken ground hex and move no further on that turn. A mounted unit may not battle on the turn it enters a broken ground hex. And if a mounted unit entered broken ground on a momentum advance, it may not bonus close combat. All units that battle into or out of broken ground roll a maximum of 2 battle dice. However, a command card that adds additional dice in battle will modify this maximum. Finally, a broken ground hex does not block line of sight. Next, let's discuss forest terrain. For movement, all units and leaders must stop when entering a forest hex and may move no further on that turn. They also may not battle that turn, with the following unit exceptions: light bow infantry, auxilia infantry, and warrior infantry. These units may move onto a forest hex and still battle. These are also the only units which can momentum advance into a forest hex and have the potential for a bonus close combat. Other units which momentum advance into a forest hex may not conduct a bonus close combat. All close combat involving a forest hex, whether attacking into or defending from, will roll a maximum of 2 battle dice. A unit attacking into a forest hex with ranged combat will roll a maximum of 1 die. However, a command card that adds additional dice in battle will modify both of these maximums. Finally, a forest hex blocks line of sight. Next, let's discuss terrain hexes with hills. With hills, there are no movement restrictions. When units attack into a hill hex with close combat, they are attacking uphill and roll a maximum of 2 battle dice. When battling an enemy unit that is downhill, or when battling from one hill hex to another hill hex, foot units roll a maximum of 3 battle dice. Mounted units roll a maximum of 2 battle dice. Finally, a hill hex blocks line of sight to units behind it. A unit on a lower level has line of sight onto the first hill hex and vice versa. However, a unit on a lower level does not have line of sight through one hill hex onto a second hill hex with a unit and vice versa. In other words, a unit at a lower level is not able to see or be seen if at least one other hill hex is between the 2 units. Line of sight is not blocked between units that are both on hills because they are at the same level. Terrain with water is often impassable and acts as a map barrier. This includes river hexes. With a river hex, they typically cannot be entered without a bridge. This means that shore and unbridged river hexes cannot be attacked into or defended from. However, river hexes do not block line of sight. Therefore, if a river hex runs through a map, units can use range combat to attack enemy units on the other side. However, there are some scenarios that have fordable rivers. With a fordable river hex, all units and leaders must stop when entering and may move no further on that turn. For battles, a unit may battle in the turn it enters a fordable river hex. When battling an enemy unit on a fordable river hex, or a unit on a fordable river hex battling out, both units will roll a maximum of 2 battle dice. A unit that battles with ranged combat out of a river will roll a maximum of 1 battle die. A command card that adds additional dice in battle will modify the maximum number of battle dice allowed. After a successful close combat, a unit on a fordable river hex may make a momentum advance out of that hex. Also, a fordable river hex does not block line of sight. Some river hexes may have bridges spanning them. If a river hex has a bridge in place, there are no movement restrictions. And a unit may battle on the turn it enters a bridge hex. When attacking into a bridge hex, a maximum of 2 battle dice are rolled in close combat. Range combat is unaffected. A unit defending out from a bridge hex will roll a maximum of 2 battle dice in close combat or 1 battle die in range combat. A unit on a bridge hex may still make a momentum advance after a successful close combat. A foot unit defending on a bridge hex may also ignore 1 flag rolled against it. And a command card that adds additional dice in battle will modify these maximums. Finally, a bridge hex does not block line of sight. Next, let's look at the camp hex. For movement, all units and lone leaders must stop when entering a camp hex and may move no further on that turn. When an ordered unit or lone leader leaves a camp hex, they may only move onto an adjacent hex regardless of their movement allowance. However, a unit that makes a successful close combat after moving out of a camp hex may make a momentum advance if terrain permits. In Commands and Colors Medieval, camps are identified as either friendly or enemy and have different bonuses. All units defending from a friendly camp hex may ignore 1 flag. Units battling out from a friendly camp may roll a maximum of 3 battle dice. However, when friendly units are trying to retake a friendly camp, that number is reduced to a maximum of 2 battle dice. When units battle into or from an enemy camp, they may roll a maximum of 2 battle dice. With camps, either friendly or enemy, command cards that add dice to these numbers are allowed. And finally, camps block line of sight. Next, let's discuss the Marsh Hex. A unit must stop when it enters a Marsh Hex and may move no further on that turn. The unit must also roll 1 battle die for a possible block loss. 1 block is lost when the unit's symbol is rolled. A leader casualty check is not required when a unit with an attached leader block is lost in the marsh. However, if the last block in the unit is lost in the marsh, the leader must evade. Retreating or evading units do not stop when entering a Marsh Hex. A unit that must retreat or evades onto or through a Marsh Hex must still check for possible block loss for each Marsh Hex it retreats or evades onto. Marsh block loss die rolls are made prior to removing blocks for unfulfilled map edge hex retreats. And lone leaders moving onto, evading, or escaping onto or through Marsh Hexes are also subject to loss. Roll 1 die for each Marsh Hex a lone leader retreats or evades onto. A leader symbol roll will eliminate the leader. Finally, an ordered unit or lone leader that leaves a Marsh Hex may only move onto an adjacent hex regardless of its normal movement allowance. For combat, a unit may battle the turn it moves onto a Marsh Hex. When battling an enemy unit on a Marsh Hex, a maximum of 2 battle dice are rolled in close combat. A unit that elects to advance onto a Marsh Hex after a successful close combat must check for a possible block loss. A unit on a Marsh Hex battling out will roll a maximum of 2 battle dice in close combat and 1 die in range combat. A unit on a Marsh Hex that has not already moved this turn may make a momentum advance out of the Marsh Hex onto the vacated hex after a successful close combat, but cavalry units may not make a special momentum advance. Finally, Marsh Hexes do not block line of sight. Commands and Colors Medieval has city walls. For movement, city walls are normally considered impassable terrain for all units unless siege rules are in effect. When siege rules are in effect, the attacking foot units have scaling ladders and other siege equipment. A quick note, all city wall scenarios in the core game are considered impassable terrain. For battle, no battle is possible unless the siege rules are in effect for the scenario. Finally, city walls block line of sight to units behind them and vice versa. Now, let's discuss city gates. For movement, only friendly units and leaders allied to the city may move, retreat, or evade onto or through a hex with a city gate. To friendly units, the gate is considered open. However, enemy units and lone leaders of the city may not move, retreat, or evade onto or through a hex with a city gate. For these units, the gate is considered closed. A city gate that is closed is treated as impassable terrain for these units. City gates can be entered by enemy units if they are successfully stormed. To storm a city gate, an ordered unit must be in an adjacent hex to the gate and be eligible to battle in close combat. The unit will roll 2 dice against the gate. When 1 or more sword symbols are rolled, the gate is opened, even from units that normally do not score a hit in close combat on sword rolls. If the unit also has an attached leader, the gate can be opened with a helmet symbol. Once a gate is successfully stormed, it will remain open. To keep track of this, remove the city gate tile from the battlefield. The unit that opened the gate may momentum advance onto the hex, but may not bonus close combat. A friendly unit of the city that occupies a city gate hex may be attacked. If the unit on the gate hex is eliminated or retreats from the gate hex, the attacking unit may momentum advance onto the hex, but the unit may not bonus close combat. The gate in this case is considered stormed, and the gate will remain open. Remove the city gate tile from the battlefield. A city gate hex when occupied by a friendly unit of the city is considered open and has no combat restrictions. And finally, a city gate hex blocks line of sight to units behind the city gate hex and vice versa. Now that we've covered terrain for Commands and Colors Medieval, you should be ready for the later scenarios in this game. As a reminder, page 20 through 22 in the rulebook have the terrain rules, and simplified fan-made charts can be downloaded from Board Game Geek. As you may have noticed, many of the tile rules remain the same from Commands and Colors Ancients. However, several tiles, especially city gates and city walls, are very different from the previous game. Keep these differences in mind when playing these games. If you found this video helpful, please give me a like and share with your friends. To be the first notified when the next episode of Harsh Rules becomes available, please hit the bell icon for notifications. And as always, this has been Harsh for Harsh Rules. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.